This is Nutty Vision, breaking news with Hector Polo.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration will release graphic warning labels for cigarette packages this week to remind American people about the dangers of smoking, moving away from the smaller print warnings currently found on cartons. Pavita George has the story.
Smoking claims at least 400,000 lives in the United States each year, and now federal regulators are sending out a strong reminder of the consequence of lighting up by putting graphic labels on cigarette cartons. Designed to cover at least 50% of the front and the back of a cigarette pack, the proposed labels include pictures of diseased lungs and rotten gums. But that's not enough to change the minds of some smokers, who say they know the risks of smoking, but continue anyway.
I mean, I feel bad for people who smoke, but you have to want to stop smoking yourself. You're not going to stop for anybody else.
But you smoke yourself, so...
Yeah. But that's because I choose to. My father died of cancer, and, that hasn't stopped me from smoking.
Well, I think they're good pictures, and they probably may deter some people who are considering smoking. Those of us who already smoke know the risks that we're taking, so probably will not have any effect on current smokers, I don't think.
Similar warnings have been used in other countries, but experts say the new labels did not create a measurable drop in smoking rates. Anti-smoking advocate and law professor John Bansev says studies show the best way to deter smokers is to hike the cost of their addiction.
If Congress increased the tax on cigarettes, either to worldwide levels or the same percentage we had back in the 50s before we even knew that smoking was dangerous, we would save tens of billions in healthcare dollars when people quit. We'd also bring in enormous amounts of revenue to help balance our budget. It's a win-win-win situation.
The new labels will take at least 15 months to start appearing on cigarette boxes.
The International Monetary Fund said on Monday it will have to be sure Greek reforms are on track and will finance by the Eurozone before the fund can pay it out its part of the next aid trains for Athens. Sonia Lek reports.
Greece has no option. Tough austerity measures must be implemented. That's the message from the International Monetary Fund's acting head.
For a successful review of the existing program with Greece, which means approval of a new disbursement, and that it requires the IMF's executive board to conclude that the program is on track and that it is fully financed.
John Lipsky's warning followed a decision by Eurozone finance ministers not to hand over 12 billion euros in aid until Athens pushes reforms through Parliament. They've been given 2 weeks to comply.
The recovery in the euro area economy is broadly sound, but the sovereign crisis in the periphery remains a risk and will require continued action and attention to avoid it causing trouble in the core and spilling over to the rest of the world.
Many Greeks have clearly seen enough austerity measures, but Olli Rehn, the European Commissioner for Economic and Monetary Affairs, said all struggling Eurozone countries had to hold steady.
Times are difficult. The reform fatigue is visible in the streets of Athens, Madrid and elsewhere. What we need now is determined bridge building and the resilience to stay on course, on the reform course at this present critical juncture.
Greece's parliament will vote on the new package of reforms on June the 28th.
Thousands of young people took the streets of Spain's capital, Madrid, again on Sunday. They were angry at high unemployment and politicians who they said were not doing enough to reverse the country's bleak economy prospects. Euronews reports.
Chanting, "They don't represent us," The protesters converged on the Spanish Parliament building, determined to send a message. This man said, "The politicians continue to ignore us, saying we're protesting against the crisis because of unemployment. What we're protesting against is their attitude. We don't like it. They ignore us when we're out here on the streets. We have a clear message, but they water it down, manipulate it, and say other things." Similarly fed up Spaniards are marching in other major cities, including Barcelona, where protests turned violent earlier this week. Though they are vague about what should change, the protesters blame bankers and politicians for Spain's 20% unemployment rate, which among young people is over 40%.
Libyan officials say at least 15 civilians were killed when NATO airstrikes hit a compound owned by a top Gaddafi assistant. Deborah Litterback reports.
A compound in Sirman, Libya, some 45 miles west of Tripoli. Libyan government officials say it was the home of Khaludi Hamadi, a member of the 12-member Revolutionary Command Council that leader Muammar Gaddafi set up after seizing control of the country in 1969. Officials say at least 15 civilians were killed when NATO targeted the compound. Libyan officials take journalists to the site to show the damage. Government spokesman Musa Ibrahim.
Yet again, in another crime against humanity committed by the criminal organization of NATO, Libyan civilian families were attacked in the early hours of this morning, killing 15 people, including children, fathers and mothers, uncles and aunts. The number is 15 people from around 5 houses.
On Sunday, NATO admitted it had killed civilians when it thought it was targeting a missile site. At a nearby hospital, journalists are shown the remains of those who died. A medical official stands near the bed of an injured child. A nurse displays the amputated leg of a young woman.
An Iranian film about couples failing marriage has won the top prize of the Sydney Film Festival. Adrian Richella reports.
Australian stars and movie makers celebrated the climax of the Sydney Film Festival with the announcement of the official competition winner.
We take the great pleasure in awarding the Sydney Film Prize to The Separation.
The Iranian film follows a couple whose marriage is imploding, with both trying to get a divorce. The judges were looking for a film that was audacious, courageous and cutting edge.
I want to have something, come out with new ideas in terms of filmmaking, and something very fresh, you don't feel like you're familiar with that in the past.
The director, who was woken up at 4 a.m. in the morning in Tehran with a call to say he'd won the prize, was incredibly delighted.
12 films were in competition. A Separation beat the much talked about Australian feature Sleeping Beauty.
You go to sleep, you wake up. It'll be as if those hours never existed.
The judges said it was a tough pick, with a special mention going to Cairo 678 about sexual harassment in Egypt. It's been a bumper year for the Sydney Film Festival, selling a record number of tickets and attracting more younger people than ever before.
6 months later, my father told me he was gay.
I'm gay.
The festival wraps up tonight with the Australian premiere of The Beginners, about the journey of a 75-year-old man finally coming to terms with his sexuality.